Mistress Vania Changes Jobs, Episode 9. Riko was working on refitting the cellar. Her shoulder-length straight black hair was wet with sweat. Running the length of the ceiling were a system of beams from which she could operate a number of hooks and winches. The beams were massive and larger than the beams that supported the floor above. Riko's knowledge as a Japanese rope master was essential to Mistress Vania's plan. Yet Riko was being very cautious. She had never worked with someone so heavy. It would mean an upgraded rig and ropes. She sat on the floor exhausted. The shiny white tiles were smeared with dirt and building materials. The tiles went from the floor to the ceiling. The beams had been painted to match the tiles. It was a very clinical room, and imbibed a sense of cruelty and detachment. Most importantly, it was a room that would not detract from Mistress Vania. She had to be the centre of everything. She was all-important, while the submissive was diminished to the point of almost nothing. During a session, Riko knew her role was both as an instrument and as an extension of Mistress Vania. To assist Mistress Vania, it was necessary to give up her own ego. Riko was able to do this naturally and gratefully. She respected strength, and in her eyes there was none stronger than Mistress Vania. Most of the construction work on the cellar was complete. There was still some cleaning to be done, but everything was in place. Getting to her feet, she climbed the stairs slowly. On the ground floor, Mistress Vania was reading a financial newspaper. She reclined in her comfortable chair. A full-length skirt hung in pleats around her feet. "I didn't know that they made overalls that small," said Mistress Vania, casually folding the newspaper. The overalls were like those worn by a motor mechanic or a factory worker. "They do not," said Riko, looking at her own small frame. "I sewed them myself. It was very satisfying. The old ones were too large, and got in the way with their bagginess. Being able to perform building construction and make your own clothes should have impressed Mistress Vania. However, she made a point of never being impressed by another person. "You are very diligent, Riko," said Mistress Vania. "I hope that you are not too exhausted to maintain your chat session with Roger." "I have been using my smartphone," said Riko wearily. "I have maintained a solid stream of suggestive banter. He continues to respond well, and thinks I find his personality exciting." "Is it exciting?" asked Mistress Vania. "No," said Riko, shaking her head. "He is juvenile in every way. It will be good when we capture him. I would much rather beat him than have to talk to him. The conversation is puree." "I think you mean puerile," said Mistress Vania. "But since puree means to make into a soft pulp, you might actually mean what you say." "I am sorry," said Riko, bowing her head. "Do not apologize," said Mistress Vania. "You speak superior English to that of most native speakers. The standard of education continues to decline in this country." "I will check my email," said Riko. "Roger may have sent me something, or sent me a message via my social media page." Riko used her phone to check if Roger had left her any messages. "He has invited me on a date," said Riko, excited for entirely the wrong reasons. "Good. Finally," said Mistress Vania critically. "Since that's the whole point of using a dating website, he seems sidetracked on endless discussions about movies no one's ever heard of and other topics of little interest." "It is always the case," said Riko, as though revealing a great truth about the human condition. "The least desirable men are often the most finicky." "I suppose you're right," said Mistress Vania, feeling that this person was already beyond her understanding. "From what we know about him, he has absolutely nothing to offer any woman. His weight alone must prevent him from performing the most basic functions. Where has he decided to meet? Or does this question require further pointless deliberations and discussions?" "He wants to meet at 7:30 tonight," said Riko. "It is called the Caravaggio Bar and Grill." They looked up the restaurant on their computer. "They have tried to recreate the works of Caravaggio on the wall as frescoes," said Mistress Vania, with a trace of astonishment. "Whoever is responsible should be shamed and humiliated. They are quite disgusting compared to the originals. It's enough to put you off your meal, just by the standard of the art." "It says they specialize in Turkish food," said Riko, pointing to the screen. Let's hope that they are better chefs than they are artists, said Mistress Vania. We'll take the Lexus. No one ever notices a Lexus. Roger was filled with a strong feeling of optimism as he sat at the bar of the Caravaggio Bar and Grill. Jane Gambate, otherwise known as Riko, was different. With the other women he had met online, there was always been that guarded quality of their conversation and messages. Yet with Jane he was immediately at ease. It was like he had known her for years. In the spirit of getting carried away, Roger went so far as to say that Jane was the other half of himself that would make him a complete being. This feeling in Roger was not accidental. Riko had worked hard on achieving this effect. It was the honeypot scenario on a grand scale. Riko entered the restaurant wearing a black cocktail dress. She was a personification of Roger's deepest desires. Riko said something in Japanese as she approached Roger. Roger rose from his chair, accidentally knocking it over backwards. Retrieving the chair, he approached Riko. Confused as to whether to kiss her on the cheek or shake hands, he awkwardly attempted to do both at the same time. He tried to read Riko's response in seeing his real-life persona, especially looking to see how she reacted to him now he no longer looked anything like his photograph on his profile. Roger did not understand Japanese, so he had no idea what Riko had just said. "I have kept you waiting for a long time," said Riko, this time in English. "Oh," said Roger, sitting down again. "I just ordered a Coke and chilled out. I haven't been here long. I was a little late myself." Roger lied. He had been 15 minutes early. At this point, previous women would usually have been noting all of the restaurant's exits, texting a friend with, "Oh my God, he is a beast, get me out of here," and generally looking uncomfortable. Riko showed none of these signs. She sat across the table from Roger. Her constant faint smile both reassured and unnerved him. The two feelings seemed to oscillate. Usually on a date the conversation would quickly run out of legs. Roger would then resort to talking about things that interested him. These topics of conversation were usually esoteric and impenetrably boring. Top of the list was computer games. Yet with Riko, the fabricated backstory gave Roger plenty to talk about. "So, Jane," said Roger, "you're going to be in a film. That must be very exciting. Have you done any acting before?" "I have been chosen," said Riko. "Naked Women Mud Wrestling in Prague is my first major film. It is not really acting. It is performing with improvised shouting and trash talk. I have done judo in Japan, so I have very good groundwork skills. That is the reason why I was chosen. I can wrestle. In the audition, I broke a woman's wrist. It was only a minor break, but it impressed the directors and the head of casting. They saw that my performance would be authentic." "That's amazing," said Roger, quietly, as he pictured Riko breaking someone's wrist. Riko had a petite build, but Roger saw moments of violence flash in her eyes as she spoke. "The film is in pre-production," said Riko. "It's another 3 months before we start filming. It will be a very short shooting schedule, 3 weeks." "And it's like naked?" asked Roger, expecting that it was too good to be true. "Totally naked," said Riko, "but it will be tastefully done. The director explained to me that it's all about the female form. It's art." "Art," repeated Roger, so entranced now that he could have been fed the neighbor's cat food and not noticed. "I am hoping that it will be like Our Gravity in the Moonlight," said Riko, dropping the words into the conversation knowing they would be steeped in special meaning for Roger. "Yes," agreed Roger, looking at Riko in amazement. "It is not a well-known film. I was surprised that you had it listed in your favorite films on your social networking page. The Internet is amazing how it can bring together people with common interests." "The Internet is amazing," agreed Riko, leaning forward with her chin resting on her interlocked fingers. Roger paused to check himself. He had been so strenuously working at making conversation, he had not stopped to realize that the date was still going well. There were none of the usual telltale signs of a woman desperate to escape his company. A waiter arrived with menus. "What do you think looks good?" asked Riko. "Have you eaten here before?" Roger had been to this restaurant many times. Some of his worst date catastrophes had taken place under the gaze of the amateur Caravaggio frescoes. "Once or twice," said Roger, trying to sound casual. "I think I might try the special of the day." Strangely, despite the Turkish theme, the special of the day was cod and chips. "I have always liked Istanbul," said Riko, still considering the menu. "I would like to have stayed longer, but I had to leave urgently. I have not been back for 4 years. I should go again. I only scratched the surface. It was so lovely to catch the ferry to the Anatolian side of Istanbul. There was a little restaurant there that served a wonderful lamb stew with fresh apricots and chestnuts, and for dessert, sweet pistachio pastries with clotted cream." Roger had never been to Turkey. He struggled to think of something intelligent to say, but Riko continued to talk, and there was no need to fill the gaps. "I will have the octopus with black olive paste and caper berries. Oh, and the bitter chocolate cake with the candied bergamot has me very intrigued." Roger knew little of candied bergamot. Again, over the meal, Riko kept the conversation going. "What is your job?" asked Riko bluntly. "Oh, I'm in retail," said Roger, who was currently a sales assistant in an electronics store. "The remuneration schedule is a commission-based arrangement. That suits me. I like an organization where the star performers are rewarded. I have a natural talent for sales. It's a people skill thing." Roger's sale performance was the worst in his store. He hated customers, and customers hated him. In most cases, they failed to buy anything at all. "Have you always been in retail?" asked Riko. She was not interested, but it was an obvious question. "Before that I was a crew trainer," said Roger guardedly. It was hard for Roger to talk about his very ordinary work life with a woman he believed was going to star in Naked Women Mud Wrestling in Prague. "What does a crew trainer do?" asked Riko. "They train crews," replied Roger, not making it clear that he worked in a burger chain. This answer was evasive, and Riko gave up. She returned to the topic of our gravity in the moonlight. Riko had suffered through the film as preparation for the date with Roger. "I especially like the scene where the protagonist has a romantic moment with the leader of the tribe of the horse-riding naked women," said Riko. "Oh, yes," said Roger, suddenly enthused. "The one where it takes place while on horseback." "Yes," said Riko. "So much skill for 2 people to do that scene on a moving horse. Such skillful direction as well. The scene could have been tasteless and tacky, but it wasn't. It was profound." "I'm glad you think so," said Roger. "You can tell a great deal about a person by their taste in films." Riko agreed with this sentiment. However, none of what it told her about Roger was good. Roger ordered 2 serves of pancakes for dessert. Riko wanted the date to end soon. She found Roger very boring, and the sight of his fat body annoying. The check was paid, and the end of the date was in sight. Outside of the restaurant, Roger seemed to flounder. This was new territory for him. None of his internet dates had ever got this far. "So, how did you get to the restaurant?" said Roger vaguely. "Did you bring your car, or do you need a lift?" "I came by car," said Riko quickly. "But you could walk me to my car if you would like." The Lexus was parked carefully on the side of the street, where the brightness of the nearest street lamps was obscured by a tall, leafy tree. Using her key fob, Riko immediately popped the trunk. She was expecting the obligatory good-night kiss from Roger. She hoped to move straight into her plan and avoid an embarrassing situation. "I bought you my audition video of Naked Women Mud Wrestle in Prague," said Riko, looking into the trunk. "But it's moved to the back of the trunk and I can't reach it. I don't really want to tear my dress climbing in to get it." "You have longer arms than me." Roger, instantly motivated by the prospect of naked women videos, threw himself forward, diving into the trunk head first. Like a cork in a moonshine jug, his body immediately obscured what little light there was available. Riko was already putting her plan into action. From her handbag she took her trusted yellow box. It was small and flat, around the size of a thin paperback novel. Inside was an already loaded syringe. "It's really dark in here," observed Roger. "I can't see anything." Riko stabbed the needle into one of Roger's generous butt cheeks, pushing down the plunger and injecting the contents. "Ooh," howled Roger. "Something's biting me." Fortunately for Riko, Roger was now stuck in the trunk. Unfortunately, he was also completely conscious, and his legs were protruding from the back of the car. "What bit me?" yelled Roger, wriggling to try and break free. "It felt like a python." "I don't think pythons bite their prey," said Riko, hoping the drug would soon start to work. "Pythons are constrictors. I think it was a wasp." Mistress Vania appeared from behind a large tree. She had been waiting in the shadows. With the plan going wrong, she had become concerned. "Did you administer the drug?" Mistress Vania asked Riko. The two women watched as Roger's fat legs gave pitiful and ineffectual kicks. "Yes, all of it," said Riko, "right in the butt cheek." "It's clearly not working," said Mistress Vania. "It must be localized to the fatty tissue of his buttocks." "You are right," said Riko. "His ass is too big." "What's happening?" asked Roger, sounding distressed. "Who are you talking to? Who's that with you?" "Fat is not vascular enough," said Mistress Vania. "It's not getting into his system. You will have to try again. Use the other syringe. Administer to the neck." Riko opened her yellow box and took a second syringe, loading it with a clear liquid from a bottle. "I'm stuck," said Roger. "Pull on my legs." This desperate request was not answered. Instead, Riko mounted Roger's lower back. She reached inside the trunk of the car, stretching inside to administer the injection to Roger's neck. It was dark, but she could guess where his neck was relative to the rest of his body. Trusting her instincts, Riko lunged with her outstretched arm into the darkness. As Roger yelled in pain, Riko depressed the plunger. She figured she must have hit something. Immediately, Roger's movements became labored. This time the drug was taking effect. "You ladies would not happen to have a light, would you?" said a voice. Mistress Vania turned around and found herself face to face with a middle-aged man wearing an oversized cloth cap. He had come from nowhere and had an unlit cigarette hanging from the corner of his mouth. "Ah," said the man, "I actually come over only because I thought this was Alexis L.S. I thought you were Nick Dunn." "Who?" said Mistress Vania as Riko climbed down from Roger's now motionless body. "The jockey," said the man. "Nick Dunn. He won on Drizzle Dugong." "Drizzled what?" asked Mistress Vania. "The horse. Drizzle Dugong," explained the man. "Nick Dunn was the jockey. It was 20-to-1 odds. I had $50 on it. Wonderful ride. That man could be first past the post on a Blackpool donkey. Nick Dunn is a real celebrity around here." "We don't follow horse racing," said Mistress Vania shortly. "A lot of women don't," said the man, nodding. "Too proper to gamble, and that's not a bad thing. Still, you might have seen him in the Hafton Shufti Standard, digital edition. Since Nick Dunn started to like the paper on his social networking, everyone's reading it. Was never bothered with it while it was in real paper, but now it's on my phone. I quite like it." The man showed a photo on his phone to Mistress Vania. It was the photo taken by Amanda of Nick Dunn doing his tank commander impersonation through the sunroof. Mistress Vania noted that the car in the photograph was identical to her own Lexus. "That's why I came over," said the man. "I saw the car. Thought it might be Nick Dunn. He'll stop and pass the time with you. Not at all stuck up. Fame and money hasn't spoiled him. Hasn't forgotten where he comes from. Local lad he is, but still man of the people." "Really," said Mistress Vania. Roger's legs gave a single desperate spasm. "What's his story?" said the man, noticing Roger for the first time in the dim light. They all turned and looked at Roger. Mistress Vania turned and looked at Riko. Words failed her. "He's making a YouTube video," said Riko, looking the man squarely in the eyes. "I thought it'd be something like that," said the man. He smiled and nodded, accepting this explanation and walking off into the night.